Hello, welcome to this VMUG Virtual Event sneak peek. This is going to be a great event, and we have a great little sneak peek into one of the sessions that's going to be coming up here on Thursday. If you're not aware, the VMUG Virtual Event coming up here, we've got a great keynote speaker. We're just absolutely amazed to have Kit Colbert, VP and CTO of the Cloud Platform Business Unit. He's got a great session coming up on the cloud, your way, delivering the cloud everywhere you need it with VMware's hybrid cloud. So we're really looking forward to that. It's going to be a great session. So looking forward to having everybody here with that. Also in this VMUG virtual event coming up here, we've got some incredible sessions on professional development. As more and more people look to up their career, make that transition to more of the cloud-based tech, we've got sessions on retooling your career. What does a VMware principal do? VMware Cloud and AWS, firsthand insight, which is what we're doing today. Career transformation, and then turning Enable It into a framework for career development. These are going to be incredible sessions to help you further your career into those next steps. The event is in 3 days. We've got 6 semi-live VMware sessions from VMware Cloud and AWS to Kubernetes and a little bit of everything in between. We've also got 11 on-demand sessions from VMware, and then of course the 5 community sessions. We've got hands-on labs, some just phenomenal labs with this. Of course, we've got VMware expert chats and community chats going all day, and then of course prizes. You gotta have some great prizes with this. So that is going to be our event coming up. But what I wanted to talk about today, we happen to have Paul Bryant from Brink, the security company, and he is a global virtualized architect. And he has been kind enough to join us for this session. And we're going to talk about VMware Cloud on AWS and some firsthand experiences. So, Paul, thank you for attending. Greatly appreciate it.
No problem. Happy to help.
Okay, I think one of the things that people, as they start looking at VMware Cloud on AWS and kind of look at it and want to get started, one of the big things is, you've done this. Now, you've done this for a very large company. You've had the experience, maybe even a few gray hairs with it. So what would you consider to be the most important thing for any of our members as they go into the VMware Cloud on AWS?
I would say that be ready to be excited. When I showed up at Brinks and they said that we were going to pioneer the VMC on AWS space, I was the kind of guy that got excited by that because I love to learn. Now, one of the benefits of VMC is it is a logical extension of your on-prem network in the cloud, so you don't have to retrain your VMware team and your engineers on how to do basic vSphere functions, create VMs, enable HA, things of that nature. But overall, it was a great experience, and it allowed me to gain a lot of knowledge in several other areas. One caveat I would throw out there, however, is that doing a little bit of AWS Essentials training would help anybody who's going to be an admin or an architect for VMC on AWS. And also, as you're adopting this cloud model, adopting it on-prem and having a lot of co-collaboration work between the existing teams like network, systems, and DBAs is essential as well. So.
Okay. Well, it's interesting you brought up a little bit of AWS training. Is there a big ramp up for the vSphere admin to get into the AWS, or is it just kind of like foundational knowledge, or what would you think?
I would say that if you're going to be adopting VMC on AWS, initially the knowledge will be basic 101 type stuff. Because in the beginning, you're really just using AWS for the underlying infrastructure, and that's all you really need to know. But as you advance and start to create more use cases inside your company and maybe want to adopt more AWS native services, then having a deeper understanding in AWS would be critical.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I mean, for the traditional vSphere admin, it's a left turn to go right into AWS, and having a little bit of familiar territory is a big deal. Which you kind of brought up some of the ancillary stuff. One of the questions we always tend to get is around security, and we know how to secure a vSphere on-prem. Do the rules change when you go to AWS or the VMware Cloud in AWS?
Not exactly. I mean, you're still doing the AWS Direct Connect link between the two sites, which is a private secured network. If you're still leveraging NSX-v, you have to create IPsec tunnels. With NSX-t, you have the ability to do BGP routing. There are firewalls in place. It's how you would treat any traditional data center. You can, because it's a logical extension, you can even take your AD and move it up into the cloud. So if somebody logs into the SDDC versus on-prem, they're still using their domain accounts with all their proper permissions and roles assigned to them.
Wow. So, one of the things that, we kind of seen in some of the paperwork and the marketing was it is truly just a logical extension, it shouldn't be any issue. And what you're telling me is that's pretty true then. I mean,
it is today.
Okay.
Being an early adopter, we did run into issues with permissions and authenticating and having some of our local user accounts that was created on-prem populating in the public cloud, but those bugs will work through, and it's a very streamlined process now, much more clean and clear today than it was, say, about 12 to 14 months ago. But that's just a testament to VMware. They're always taking any issues seriously and working to resolve them, and they're constantly updating the VMC and the roadmap. So it's literally getting better every day.
Well, that actually kind of tailors into something that a lot of people always have questions on, is the support aspect. Was it truly the VMware support aspect, or did you need to ever involve AWS, or was it seamless?
Well, see, that's the thing I quite enjoyed about VMC on AWS is you go through VMware support, and if it turns out that it is a back-end issue with AWS, they have AWS support staff internally, and they work together to resolve the issue, but you're constantly going through VMware support. And one of the other aspects that I enjoyed about the support is there's a chat window. So you click on a little button in your bottom right-hand corner, and it opens up a live chat with VMware support that's just dedicated to the VMware Cloud on AWS. And they will begin troubleshooting immediately, and if they have to, they'll engage back-end engineers to help resolve any issue.
And that's 24/7, the whole thing?
Yes, sir.
Wow. Okay, that's kind of a nice step up, just for the traditional vSphere admin. That's huge.
And what I like is that they are willing to troubleshoot all the way back onto on-prem. For instance, when we were having some of those SRM permission issues in the beginning, they were helping us troubleshoot our on-prem environment to figure out why certain permissions weren't populating in the cloud.
Oh, wow.
So they did help us out even with some connectivity issues where they showed that the traffic was going back to our on-prem, which meant it was on our side the issue, but they gave us a good idea of where to start looking to be able to troubleshoot even on our side the network connectivity issue.
Oh, that's great. It's healthy, as somebody who's been in IT, for years, you know this, and myself as well. When you work with two different vendors and you get the little bit of finger pointing, and it sounds like none of this occurred.
It truly is a strategic partnership that both AWS and VMware are taking very seriously, and it is a solution that VMware does believe is a future solid solution for the company. So it didn't surprise me the level of support that I was given, but I gotta admit they've made it very consumable.
Well, that's
So
great to
I
hear.
was a little worried in the beginning that, they just dump this in our lap and be like, here you go, figure it out. If you have a problem, call support. And it wasn't like that at all.
Okay,
Hey,
that's
Paul.
great.
Hey,
Oh,
Paul and Brian, it's Keith injecting in. Sorry to butt in here, but good question from Scott in the chat session. He's curious to know how big is the Brink's environment in AWS, and I don't know if you can answer this question because I think it's price sensitive, and I don't think VMware allows you to share price. But he's asking, what is it costing, and generically, are you guys saving any money versus your previous solution?
So how to answer this the way that I'm able? My first question would be which SDDC instance, because we have multiples in multiple countries. And when it comes to pricing, your mileage varies. I mean, it's split up within regions, so it depends on what you're trying to do. And then the final question was, did we save money? And yes, Brinks has even documented this, and my CIO mentioned on the stage at VMworld that we saved 38% total cost of going into the VMC for a DR solution instead of running a brick and mortar secondary site location.
And then a
So
good
there
question.
is a lot of traditional costs that come with operating even in a colo location that you don't have to pay for in VMware Cloud.
And a good follow-on question to that support. The people are really interested in that advanced support. Is that something that you guys had to pay in addition to your base cost for support, or was that experience a standard offering as part of the solution?
That came with the premium support that we purchased. So I don't even know the different support options at this point. But I would recommend the premium 24/7 support that, we're used to getting with any solution that we purchase. I mean, I can't think of the last time I ever purchased enhanced support Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 business windows, because things go wrong in the middle of the night. So I don't know if that helps or not.
well, if you're treating this as your global infrastructure, that 24/7 support is absolutely critical. And it's kind of nice that you have that at the bottom of your screen, a simple chat window that connects you right into, it sounds like, the top tier engineers for this platform.
Yes, sir. Plus, it also helps if you're doing a DR test, because who does it during the day, during production hours? So if you run into an issue, say on the weekend while you're doing a DR test to prove to end users or customers of your company that you're able to fail over, even run their applications out of the cloud like we did at Brinks and then fell back on-prem. I mean, you're doing that on the weekend. So if something were to go wrong, you would want support there to assist.
Well, and speaking of support, how did you get started with this, where you decided on your configuration? Did you work with VMware like a principal engineer? Was this how do people get started with this? What would be any thoughts?
Well, the initial is they now have a website that allows you to get a good idea of the sizing of your environment based on the workloads you want to run, but working with your local account team, and maybe even if you have a VAR or integrator, and having some session and strategy planning meetings, understand the prereqs and what it's going to take. I mean, if I really wanted to right now, I could log in with a credit card and fire up a brand new data center. But once again, without proper planning, how successful could you be?
Hmm. Well, and did a lot of your vSphere knowledge then in the SDDC then just translate into this? As the foundational piece seems to be a little, I guess how do you put it? This is still VMware. I mean, this is still your
Yes.
SDDC. It's just a different location.
Yep.
So all your experience, all your knowledge transitioned over fairly easily then?
Yes, including my vSAN experience, because vSAN is ran in the VMware Cloud on AWS. So if you understand vSAN and you're still sizing for regular compute VMs, it's easy to get an idea of what you're going to utilize. If you're, say, starting out just using it as a DR target, I mean, it's simple to figure out the storage that you're going to use, because that's how you're really going to size your environment, because you don't start leveraging the compute until you fail over to the environment. It's a simple sizing exercise. But one of the things that I enjoyed about VMC on AWS is, unlike a traditional data center, I can turn on Elastic DRaaS and add nodes or have nodes subtracted based on my workload utilization, and only pay for the host that I'm actually utilizing in my environment. Where if I had an on-prem infrastructure and I needed to grow it by, say, 30% resources, now I'm bringing in more shelves of drives from a storage array. I'm adding in more compute servers and having to go through this entire process that could take weeks just for the hardware to land on-prem. So that is one of the benefits to VMC, is the fact that it is in the cloud. So it's the resources are abundantly available.
Sounds like that made your life a little bit easier in terms of, you're growing. Typically, we only go up, but it sounds like you can control the path of it a little bit easier. I mean, we're looking at the pricing, but that's a starting point. And being able to handle a surge 3 months in or 6 months in is usually one admin's nightmare if it wasn't put in capital. So that seems to be a great benefit. Now, I also want to ask you, you've mentioned SRM a few times and you mentioned vSAN. So for the VMware admin, are those two key technologies as they look at VMware Cloud and AWS, just to kind of ensure that they have in their back pocket?
Well, vSAN is the storage solution for the VMware Cloud, so having a little bit of understanding of vSAN is not going to hurt. I mean, you could set up a mock environment where you only use the default storage policy, but not every workload requires a RAID 1 mirror for its storage. So, I mean, there are several great blogs out there to follow, and Duncan Epping writes incredible deep dive books into vSAN if you're looking for reading material. And but SRM, though, if you're looking to do DR to the cloud, that's my tool right now that I prefer to use, because you can set up replication windows, protection groups to keep VMs consistent, recovery plans so you don't fail the entire environment over, but if you wanted to fail a particular application over, and it gives you a lot of control and scripting of the environment.
Okay. So what do you think, or what is the VMware Cloud on AWS missing, or what are you looking for from it next? You talked about a little bit of, it's grown over the past few months. What's kind of on your wish list? You've been using it a while. If they could add something, what would it be?
Well, I have started to look at all their strategic partnerships. So there are companies out there like Pure Storage and Faction that will allow us to have data stores up in the cloud that aren't just built on vSAN and the EC2 instances. So I'm looking forward to those partnerships. I also am looking forward to deeper integration with AWS. I mean, right now, RDS is only in tech preview mode for an on-prem VMware environment, but that is definitely a solution from AWS that I would look forward to utilizing in the future at any company, to just take the pressure and workload off the DBA teams and have the DBAs just have to worry about the database engine and nothing else. Definitely looking forward to deeper NSX integrations in the future, to where you could deploy a load balancer in the VMC and start having larger capabilities for expanding applications as well as HA.
Okay. And I wanted to ask you one other question that might be on the mind of a few vSphere admins. Is the monitoring aspect the same tools you use on-prem? Were you using them in the cloud? Or are you using like a vRealize or something to be looking at the health of your hosts? Or do you even really need to worry about that as much out in VMware Cloud and AWS?
Well, my first initial response to that would be you're still using the same traditional vCenter performance and monitoring tools that are in your environment today, but you can add things in like vRealize Operations Manager. There's tons of tools that you can leverage, including network insights. So it depends on how much beyond the basics are you utilizing today that you'd want to integrate. And I don't have all the integrated tools memorized, but I'm confident that anything on the VMware side will be able to be run in the VMware Cloud. But as far as a hardware failure, say I lose a host in the cloud, I mean, they're just going to pop a brand new one in and DRaaS is going to take over. And so it's a very reliable infrastructure. And the ability to get back up and running at full strength at a degraded mode is much faster in the cloud. Because in the cloud, they treat servers like cattle and not the household pet like we've done so long on-prem. My server is not feeling well, and I'm about to spend thousands of dollars to make it healthy, where, don't mean this in a bad way, but hey, you just put a bullet in the back of the cow's head and just throw another cow in its spot, and nobody's going to be heartbroken.
Gotcha.
So, Paul, the question online, and I'm going to modify this a little bit. Do you guys use NSX on-prem at Brinks, and what features of NSX are you using either between Brinks and AWS, VMC on AWS, or specifically within VMC on AWS?
Well, VMC did just come out with an update not too long ago where you're able to run NSX-t up in the cloud, where traditionally it's been NSX-v. On-prem, yes, Brinks does leverage NSX. As far as connecting the two environments, that would depend on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. So it would have to, depending on the individual, it would depend on what they're trying to do, both on-prem and in the cloud, would be what would change their design.
Okay. Paul, are there any other thoughts or, your experience? You guys have been using it for over a year now. Any other thoughts you want to share? Potential things for people to look at? Things you're looking forward to?
Well, if you're looking to adopt it in the beginning, I would say have one strong use case, but be prepared because others are going to follow. I mean, you have the ability at the snap of a finger to build a brand new data center in the cloud or build a brand new cluster inside your environment. So if you stop to think from that perspective alone, let's say you want to do mergers and acquisitions, typically you're having to take a brick and mortar data center or data centers and bring them into the fold and maybe even run those facilities for 1 to 2 years. Now imagine you can spin up an SDDC or a brand new cluster in the cloud within a couple hours. Give it a couple of weeks of proper planning for migrations, and you move the workloads up into the cloud and you decommission your on-prem data center. Now let's say that you were sitting there and it took you 18 months traditionally to integrate a new data center into the fold. Now you've done it in less than 3 months, so you take those savings and you move them elsewhere. And then, it's the cloud, so perfect place to put DevOps, test dev. We've all had a couple of those VMs in our environment where you can't do proper capacity planning for because it just won't stop growing. And no matter what number they give you, the percentage is always off by 28, 39, 58, or 120%. So just move them up into the cloud and let them grow as much as the business unit is willing to pay for it. And so it's definitely a Swiss Army knife with an endless back end of resources, and it definitely gets a lot more economical than running a secondary site location.
Well, it has to be a pretty big transition from more of the capital approach over to an operational approach, and specifically an operational approach that you can typically charge back to a specific business unit. Like you mentioned, a DevOps group that's kind of running a little higher than normal. They get that bill every month. that can help alleviate some of those runaway situations really quickly.
Yeah, but one thing I liked about it is it also cuts down on shadow IT, because one of the biggest drivers of why people kept going to public clouds and going outside their security teams and outside their IT teams was IT couldn't provision resources fast enough, even in environments that had adopted a private cloud model. So that's not a problem anymore, given that AWS is the back end for VMC, because you need a net new server spun up and you're willing to pay the bill. You can spin it up in the cloud and have it up and running, talking back on-prem over that dedicated link in no time. And that cuts down on a lot of shadow IT in your environment, because you're meeting their SLAs, but they also have the money to pay for that VM maybe running in the cloud because they were prepared to open, say, an AWS account on their own and spin up the environment themselves.
Well, it's kind of like you mentioned, this is a commodity. How AWS approaches hardware, it's a commodity. And when one breaks, it's simply swapped out. Most companies simply can't do that in their on-prem data centers. And that gives you that agility you need. And to be honest, though, as long as you pay for it, but it is a monthly fee, and being able to reallocate that to the appropriate business unit or developer group could save a lot of money over the long haul. And that's kind of, I think, what you've alluded to is it's been a huge cost savings for Brinks.
Oh no, definitely cost savings, because that fixed pricing is actually something I did enjoy, because AWS has those shared models where the resources aren't 100% dedicated to your environment, but with VMC, those are dedicated instances, so you're not sharing compute resources with any other company. So it's actually in your best interest to utilize 100% of the resources you have allocated to your environment, or if you're for some reason shrinking your cloud footprint, Elastic DRaaS will remove that host from your environment. So it truly is a flexible architecture.
So, Paul, what for the production workloads that you guys have running up in VMC on AWS? I know you've written a ton about using VMC on AWS as a DR solution. For the production workloads, how do you guys approach backup? Are there is it similar solutions to what you're using on-prem? Are you guys doing anything specifically with some of the newer backup solutions that approach backup differently?
Well, I'll say this. Veeam is integrated with VMC very nicely as part of one of those strategic partnerships, but I'm not a Veeam salesman, but I'll say that backing up the cloud is as easy as on-prem. It just is a matter of which solution you want to use that is on VMware's accepted backup list. And if you're doing replication with, say, SRM, you always do your reverse mappings as you're setting up SRM. So if you ever needed to run workloads in the cloud, you have the ability to replicate them back on-prem. So if for whatever reason you lost an entire geography, meaning AWS Ashburn just went dark, you'd have the ability to spin those workloads up on-prem until AWS came back, and then you just do a reprotect and the deltas would sync back, and then you could fail those workloads back over into the cloud to run and wait for the next extremely impossible AWS geography going offline.
That is very impressive. Well, with that, I think.
Oh, and one other thing I wanted to answer, because I get this question on my blog a lot, is how much does the egress cost to go from the VMware Cloud to the AWS underlying infrastructure cost? And that is free. VMware picks up the bill for that. So don't worry about putting a production workload up in your SDDC and having to pay every time it's writing data to the underlying AWS infrastructure, because that's at zero cost to the end user.
Oh, that's great. Wow. Well, Paul,
now obviously if you're writing that data back on-prem, you're going to be charged a nominal fee, which is minuscule, honestly. But as far as in the cloud, you don't have to worry about that.
Oh, that's great. As we kind of get near the end of the session, any other final thoughts you have with VMware Cloud and AWS?
It's not the scary dragon that everybody thinks that they have to slay. Obviously, you do have to start learning a little bit about AWS, and if you've never touched SRM in the past, you have to learn a little bit about SRM. And if you want to start tweaking from the vanilla default environment, learning a little bit about vSAN is not that rare. So I just say come with an open mind, realize that it's nothing intimidating, nothing scary. Support's just one click away with chat if you run into issues. And it really is a great secondary site location with many business use cases, and I blog about it all the time on my blog, and I put a lot of how-to guides out there from my own personal experience just to help out early adopters of this technology. Because if I had a blog to read back in the day, or some personal experience, that would have probably made some things go a little smoother for me. But that's also one of the fun things about pioneering a technology is you're making it up as you go along.
Absolutely. Keith, any other questions from the chat?
No, these were some really good questions, and I think one just a question around backup and specific products. Someone asked about a specific product. I think it's most important to Paul's point that you go with approved products for VMC on AWS. If the product is approved, VMware does some pretty rigorous testing with their partners, and I'd be pretty safe to go with that. If you're using a product that has worked in your environment before, but isn't on the approved list, it's kind of, venture at your own risk type of thing. You should really reach out to both your backup vendor and VMware to get that on the approved list.
Okay. Well, with that,
I'd also like to throw an extra one in there real quick, if you don't mind. I'm surprised nobody asked any migration questions. From migrating on-prem workloads to the cloud, HCX is free for VMware Cloud on AWS customers, so that's probably the easiest and most affordable tool to use. But you can also use other tools like SRM. You can, if you do the stretch network, you could do a live vMotion into the cloud. You could do a cold migration, or you could even leverage a company like Veeam to replicate data up to the cloud and then fail it over and then just run the workloads up in the cloud. But HCX being free and built for migrations, I would say it's probably going to be the easiest of all those tools, and it's free. So
free is not a bad thing. Okay, well, Paul, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for all this insight, and thanks to all the viewers. And the slides and links are in the show notes here. So thank you very much, and have a great day.